All right, time for another DraftPhysics.com, debatephysics.com, also video presentation. And so, more from Wikipedia. Okay, so we did get a reply. So one of the gatekeepers showed up, to pretend there's no subject, to pretend there's not a problem, blah, 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 blah. And it's, they just ignore the subject entirely. So like every other forum, they don't, they don't have to have an authority. They don't have to cite any evidence. They don't have to cite any reasoning. They can just tell us that, no, we all say so, and that's all that matters. We say so. And so it's the truth, and it's just such crap. All right, so this should be a public discussion. It should be something science takes seriously. There's a defect in their theory. They're not owning up to it. And they're just pretending there's no problem because they have this energy duality. Okay, so he says, you have to watch the previous video. So we'll call this Thrust 2. Go watch Thrust 1, Wikipedia. Anyway. Neither thrust, a force, so he's conceding thrust is a force, nor momentum is energy. So forces aren't energy. Okay, so things that cause other things to move aren't energy. Now, that can make sense to you, but it can't possibly make any sense in my opinion. That's just absolute nonsense. If something causes something to move, to change its motion, it has performed an act of energy upon it. There's no getting around that. So he's just basically saying here, we've decided the semantics is that you cannot use the word energy in any other context than our kinetic energy theorem. And clearly, they're overtly stating in the thrust page that no, thrust is about momentum. Kinetic energy isn't mentioned on the page. Thrust is about momentum. So how could somebody call thrust not energy? So a frickin' rocket takes off, produces zillions of, it's actually billions of tons of pressure. Okay, and they're saying that's not energy. So that stuff coming out of the end of the rocket isn't energy. And this guy's somebody defending the truth? Oh, please. All right. Different units of measurement, whatever that even means. What are you talking about? You can't measure thrust with the kinetic energy formula. That's exactly the accusation. It doesn't work that way. Okay, momentum landed us on the moon. Okay, that's the overt statement I'm making that you're ignoring. Amazing. Anyway. In your thought experiment, it takes much more energy to get the 1 unit of mass moving 1,000 units of velocity than it takes to get 1,000 units of mass moving 1 unit of velocity. So, he says so, right? So, we really won't ever have an experiment that proves any of that crap. So that's exactly him saying, we've proven it takes 4 times the energy to go twice as fast. We've proven it takes 9 times the energy to go 3 times as fast. We've proven it takes 16 times the energy to go 4 times as fast. We've proven it takes 25 times the energy to go 5 times as fast. We proved it when they haven't done any such thing. Okay, it's an established fact, even though we have zero experimental evidence demonstrating it to be true. I mean, amazing bullshit. Okay, the article does discuss rocketry. Well, that's not the accusation, okay? Clearly what I accused it of doing is ignoring what thrust is used for in navigating in space. And clearly it's not about what happens in atmospheres, and it's not what happens when you have to tie a rubber band to a rocket. It's about what happens to a rocket when it's in space, and it's going to throw stuff out of itself, okay, energy, and it's going to be moved by the thrust of that energy. Briefly noting its similarity to jet propulsion. So again, more crap about jets and airplanes and all kinds of crap that has nothing to do with the essential use of thrust, which is space travel, because frankly, you can't use any other sort. Propellers don't work. Turbines don't work. You can't use a water wheel in space. I mean, your energy source essentially has to be thrust in space. You're not going anywhere without thrusting yourself somewhere. Okay, there probably is room for more discussion of the rocket thrust equation. No, it's called the rocket equation, and frankly, again, it's an equation about how your mass is changing as you're burning fuels. But of course, that would be of no meaning if you were using a very compact fuel like nuclear fuel. All right, but we would need to cite reliable sources. Yeah, when you're not going to find any, you don't have any now. What's your reliable source? Well, the dogma. Physics professor says so. That's it. He didn't prove so. He just says so. All right, not thought experiments. So again, an essential component of science is thought experiments and producing answers to the thought experiment. I'm sure they do plenty of discussion of the twin paradox and other things on Wikipedia. So clearly those are all thought experiments, light clocks, all kinds of stuff are thought experiments. So again, this bigotry against thought experiments, except when we want to use them. So when we want to use them to make our point, they're okay. When you want to use them to make your point, they're not okay. Just duplicity. Okay. So I replied. So his statement, neither thrust a force nor momentum is energy. What is your authority for that opinion? So cite me something. Who says so? And why do they say so? I mean, why is it credible? Why is it a credible statement? Quoting Newton, twice the force equals twice the movement. You're claiming that movement isn't energy. So that's a direct enough a question, right? Is that what he's saying? Movement doesn't require energy. Things move without energy being applied. That's his claim. I don't need to apply energy to make something move. Okay. It takes much more energy to get 1 unit of mass moving. Okay, so that's a quote of what I said. And I said, what's your authority for that statement? So he says it takes more energy, quote unquote. Now, thrust isn't about energy. It's about momentum. Clearly stated in the first sentence of the thrust Wikipedia page, it says right there, Newton's third law. Newton's third law is explicitly about momentum. All right, it doesn't mean anything to kinetic energy. Obviously, kinetic energy can create and destroy kinetic energy. You don't need to worry about any third frickin' law. It doesn't apply. So what's the point of this statement? What's the value in this statement of him saying it does when he can't prove that it does? So go ahead, show me some experiment proving that it takes 16 times the fuel to go 4 times faster. To spin a motor 4 times faster requires 16 times the energy. Show me that experiment. All right. So what's your authority for that statement? And how is it consistent with Newton's third law? So, I mean, the real problem with the statement is, what's the point of citing Newton's third law in the first sentence on the page if you're going to say, well, I don't have to use the same energy to create the same amount of movement. I can get more momentum, apparently, or kinetic energy. I can get more energy. Okay, out of the same force. All right, the same explosion makes the bullet have more energy than the gun recoil. So how's the third law apply to a gun being fired? Where's the evidence of the third law? There's no evidence that the third law has anything to do with what they're claiming energy to be. All right. So he states, the article does discuss rocketry briefly, noting the similarity to jet propulsion, I say only in the context of atmospheric or gravitational drag. So it really only talks about it in terms of overcoming some other force. And clearly it doesn't state anything about kinetic energy, but I'm just saying it really is a narrow discussion about force counterforce. It's not really a discussion about you going somewhere. There probably is room for more discussion of the rocket thrust equation. Well, at least that's some concession. But again, he's putting it in the context of the rocket thrust equation, which is an equation built out of relativity and other nonsense. This idea that somehow because my ship gets lighter. I have to compensate for the fact that now my thrust has more energy, and that my thrust somehow has more energy by the kinetic energy theory, when in fact my thrust has less energy because I'm going faster and faster. As I go faster and faster, the relative speed of my exhaust gets slower and slower. Obviously, the faster I go, the differential between how fast I'm going and how fast my exhaust is going changes. All right, and that's what that equation is about. It's not about the real nature of thrust. That is, the fact that you're throwing a certain amount of energy out and you're going to get the recoil. Okay, the third law part. All right, the rocket equation is only relevant in circumstances where fuel has substantial mass. It would have little use if you were using a nuclear fuel. Okay. So he says, we need to cite reliable sources, not thought experiments. Just really nonsense. Essential part of physics is thought experiments. Just idiotic to think that you can have any discussion about nuclear physics without having to apply models that are made out of thoughts. Because we really aren't going to have the videotape. All right, Isaac Newton should be considered a reliable source. In his second law, he explicitly stated twice the force, twice the movement. In my opinion, good science requires thought experiments. As stated, the page should be able to answer the question. So the simple truth is, you're asking a simple question to the thrust page, right? The thrust page. I throw the thrust out in the form of bowling balls out one side and BBs out the other side. So I take the same amount of force, quote unquote, shoot those things out of my rocket as momentum. So it's the same momentum going this way, same momentum going that way, except the BBs are going really fast, so they have more kinetic energy. Incidentally, more kinetic energy, right? It's not my fault. I have to make the BBs go faster because they're smaller. So they have to go faster to be the same momentum. So I throw the same momentum out both sides. Yet I have more kinetic energy on one side than I have on the other side. I use the same force to create it. Again, there's no evidence it takes 16 times the fuel to go 4 times as fast. There's all kinds of evidence that, no, you want to go twice as fast, you use twice the energy. You want to go 3 times as fast, you use 3 times the energy. You want to go 4 times as fast, you use 4 times the energy. That's where all the experimental evidence points. So, again, shouldn't the page be able to answer the question? What constitutes thrust? Heavy things have no thrusting power, so I can throw heavy things out my ship all day, but I won't go anywhere. And it's only when I throw light things out that I go somewhere, when we know that's not true, that it just depends on momentum. And that's stated explicitly when they cite the third law in the first sentence. They're conceding it's about momentum, and the rest of the page doesn't say the words kinetic energy anywhere. I mean, come on. All right, so I respond, can you answer the question? More precisely, will you answer the question and demonstrate you know what you're talking about? Because we really need this explicit statement. If they're going to claim this is the truth, then go ahead and stand by it. Okay, make your declaration. Point out that, okay, kinetic energy is in fact irrelevant. Thrust is momentum. That's what it should clearly say on the Wikipedia page about thrust. It's about momentum. And kinetic energy doesn't matter. The bullet having 1,000 times more energy doesn't matter because it won't turn the ship. The only thing that's going to turn the ship, the only thing that's going to cause the ship to move is momentum. The page should explicitly say that. Kinetic energy is irrelevant. Momentum is the only cause of the effect. For thrust to have an effect, it's only can have that effect through exchanges of a momentum. It should be forced to say that. All right. So let's see what happens. Yeah. They just close it down. There's absolutely zero willingness to accept that this jargon of physics, these dualities, this nonsense is completely inconsistent. They're talking out of both sides of their faces. It can't make any sense to anybody reasonable. You cannot have this energy duality, this pretense that when I want kinetic energy to mean something, it will mean something. So if I'm moving an electron, kinetic energy means something important. But if I'm moving a spaceship in space and I'm navigating, all of a sudden kinetic energy doesn't mean a damn thing. Useless, meaningless. I mean, it's garbage as physics. It's garbage as science. It's an insult to reasonable intelligence, okay? You can't be reasonably intelligent and not feel insulted that they're going to tell you, they're going to talk out of both sides of their face right in front of you. They're going to say two different things. Kinetic energy is energy. And the next time, well, momentum is energy when you're moving spaceships. I mean, it's just such bullshit. All right. Shall I say anything more? I mean, he did ignore the complete beginning of my other statement. It seems, it's just that it should be able to, the question that should be explicitly answered is the energy momentum, or can it be properly measured as kinetic energy? Can you use the kinetic energy theory and get accurate predictions of outcomes? Can you land on the moon? Can you navigate your lunar module with the kinetic energy theory and land on the moon successfully? This should be questions they're willing to answer explicitly and just show, I mean, frankly, it would just show their ignorance, and it would show their duplicity. Because to give the right answer, they would have to say, no, of course not. You can't use kinetic energy. It's a nonsense. It doesn't work in space. It will not land you on the moon. There is not 2,000 joules of energy in the bullet and only 2 joules of energy in the gun recoil, according to the moon. The moon doesn't say so. Okay, to the moon, it's all the same. Same energy, same thrust. All right. Yeah. All right. Well, I'll take a pause and see if I need to throw anything else at this. But every forum is like this. These people will not argue the argument. They will not argue the subject. They won't pay any attention to it. They'll just cite their dogma without any citation to anything called a true source. A source that says, yes, you must believe. He says so. This is just a religion. And, they've decided that Feynman's going to tell us what the truth is, or Einstein's going to tell us what the truth is, and we cannot disagree with their God, whoever they've designated to be God. They're frickin' bishops and preachers. It's disgusting.